team we're both feeling quite positive about
Yeah.
next season, but what about this season? What grade did you give them?
I got with B+.
Really?
Yeah. I've gone with B+.
Wow.
What have you gone with?
I've gone with a D.
Are you serious?
They spent the third most in the division last season.
I don't care about spend. No, spending this context doesn't matter because they had to spend. They had to spend
right now. Hello and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks and I'm joined by the Yondal Thomason to my John Eustace. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
Justin Peach. Here we are once again, recording face to face, it's worth saying.
Ooh.
And we are still coming down after the trials and tribulations of the playoff final.
I know. I thought I'd be sick of you by now, but we're still tolerating each other. There's no black eyes. We're still amongst it, and yeah, we are still coming down from what was an incredible day. Incredible day at Wembley.
Yeah, I feel like I've still got that post-exam anxiety, which is still here in my body. But, you know, I'm still just trying to recover and going again.
Going again. And that's the key thing. That's what Leeds have got to do, haven't they? They've got to go again. We've got to go again with them because they're still in the Championship and we're still covering
Yes,
the best league in the world.
As we were saying on Sunday, despite the football being over now, despite the season being over, we are still here, ladies and gentlemen, bringing you 2 episodes a week right up until the start of the next season. The season may be over for those pesky players, but not for us. We are still going hammer and tongs.
We don't take holidays.
No.
We never go away. We're here. We're going on your holidays. We've said that already, but we're going again.
Yes, I would like a holiday, but we're not having one. Welcome to the number one Championship podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Yes, as you probably guessed from the title of this episode, what we're doing today, ladies and gentlemen, is going through every team in the Championship and giving them a grade based on the season that they have had. We're also going to be having a look ahead to next season as well, talking about our early expectations for each team heading into next season. And because we've got 24 teams to cover in this episode, we're splitting it into 2 parts, but because we didn't want to make you wait until Sunday, we're putting out both episodes at the same time. So even though you're listening to part 1 right now, you can listen to part 2 straight after this one. So you know what? We may as well get straight into it, Justin, and kick things off with the first team alphabetically. That's Birmingham City, the team who will not be with us next season after they've been relegated from the Championship. I wonder what your first grade is going to be in this episode, Justin.
It's an easy one, isn't it? It's such an easy one. I'm going with an F.
It's a big fat F,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's just got to be. There's no 2 ways about it. If you said at the start of the season Birmingham City would be relegated, that's a failure, isn't it?
Well, without doubt, isn't it? The fact that there's so much promise going into the summer, even without the takeover, I'd have still backed John Eustace to keep Birmingham City in the Championship. You know, you'd imagine there'd be limited movement.
Not even that, Justin. I think you're doing them a disservice even there because you're looking at top half, aren't you?
Well, yeah, this is without the takeover. With the takeover, I'd have backed John Eustace to keep them pushing for the top 6 or being in the conversation at various points this season, which would have been a huge achievement considering their past failures. But as I say, that F grade is a mark against the organisation at the club. The subsequent sort of plan they thought they had with Wayne Rooney, and then the disaster that then followed, and obviously unfortunate with Tony Mowbray picking up an illness and then being off. It was just, there was a lot of mistakes made. There was also a lot of bad luck as well. But ultimately, the club has failed by being relegated down to League One.
Yes. And considering they've got these new owners in who are very ambitious, they've said loads of right things on the pitch. It's ultimately gone very, very wrong, hasn't it? And you can pinpoint the exact moment where it did go wrong. That was the appointment of Wayne Rooney, the ultimate act of self-sabotage we have ever seen in the Championship. And they just never recovered from that point, did they?
No, they didn't. And it's a big thing because you've got to follow it up with a good decision, a good appointment. And whilst Wayne Rooney would have looked great on paper, he's got this brilliant playing career behind him. Again, on paper, from the outside, you know, an outsider's perspective from Derby, did okay at Derby. Then went to DC United, and it was a bit. Oh, it's the MLS, isn't it? You can't really judge a manager on what they did in the MLS and then compare it to what they're going to do in the Championship. Rooney's career's not really backed it up, and I think that should have been a big pointer for the owners, and it wasn't. And unfortunately, they did pay the price because what Wayne Rooney tried to do was change everything in a very short space of time, and ultimately that is the reason why I think Birmingham City have been relegated.
Yeah, at the same time, we can't put it all on Wayne Rooney. You've got to look at the ownership who decided to make that change in the first place, and that's the ultimate thing that ultimately cost Birmingham in the end. Looking towards next season then, Justin, how we're feeling with Blues. Obviously, a lot still needs to be sorted out over the next few months, doesn't it, before the League One season kicks off?
Yeah, I think this is the annoying thing is they had such a good summer last summer with recruitment. They signed like Ethan Laird, Dion Sanderson came in, Tyler Roberts. I think on paper is a good signing because there's a lot of potential still there for me. Christian Bielik signed permanently, Lee Buchanan as well. There's a good core of players at the football club, and that was last summer. So you'd expect them to do well again in terms of recruitment this summer. They've got a good enough squad to be tipped as champions, but it's just all about who they bring in as a manager. That's the big thing for Birmingham City, and they've got to commit to a manager who knows what they're doing in terms of getting out of League One, but also is capable of competing again in the Championship because they can't be chopping and changing. They need some sustainability there because we're not seeing it. 5 managers this past season isn't sustainable. So they've got to go out and get an appointment that is essentially a long-term one, but also one that knows what they're doing in terms of getting out of competitive League One.
Yeah, I don't think you can get too carried away with Birmingham just yet. At the moment, would say I fancy them to bounce back because these owners are so ambitious, but there's a lot that needs to happen over the summer for my belief in that to be reaffirmed because they need to sign well and they obviously need to get the right man in, whoever that may be. But if everything falls in place, I mean, remember when John Ruddy got relegated with Birmingham after that, he was saying, I still expect this team to be in the Premier League in 5 years' time, which is bold, isn't it? But that goes to show the ambition that the Birmingham owners have. And that's why you'd have thought they should bounce back. But obviously, a lot needs to be reaffirmed before we can decide on that. Justin, let's go to the next club. We've got Blackburn Rovers. What grade have you given them?
I've given Blackburn a D.
I've also given them a D. Look at this. We haven't had any correspondence between ourselves to decide what grade we're going for, but at the moment we've got both of them nailed on. Justin, why have you given them a D?
I've given them a D. I mean, the season's been poor, really, really poor. To be fighting relegation, I literally have to go to the final day. I think with how well they did last season, finished 7th. They were in the playoffs for a long time last season before ultimately dropping out again towards the end of the campaign. I think a lot of Blackburn fans would have been hoping for them to at least be a mid-table side. And with John Yondal Thomason as well, you've got a team, or a manager there who's very, very ambitious. He wants to do the very best. He's had a lot of success in other leagues, wanted to come over to Blackburn and have more success, and that's not really been the case. And as I say, I think the big thing there for Blackburn is ultimately you get to the final day of the season and you're fighting relegation. You are within goals of going down. It's not good enough, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's been a really disappointing season, hasn't it? Considering this Blackburn team, only missed out on the playoffs last season by a matter of a few points or even goal difference. The fact that they have only just stayed up by goal difference says a lot, doesn't it? So that's well, not but stayed up by a goal difference, but stayed up by 3 points. Coming down to the last day is what I'm trying to say. That's really underwhelming. But it's kind of been a season of two halves where you've had 2 decent starts and ends, but the middle bit was pretty shocking. It was a shit sandwich, wasn't it?
It was a shit sandwich. Yeah. Blackburn have been a shit sandwich, and it's not good enough really because we were promised so much with like Greg Broughton, the director of football. We promised so much. Recruitment was really poor. Didn't reinvest like to Thomas Kaminski money or the Ashley Phillips money back into the squad. They haven't been able to. Obviously lost Ben Barrington Diaz last summer as well on a free. The running of the club has been horrendous, and obviously there's a lot of uncertainty with the ownership as well in terms of they got the high court thing going on in India. It's not an ideal position to be in, and obviously they sold Alan Wharton in January as well, further weakening that side. Are they going to reinvest that money? They haven't done anything since, or in the past 12 months in terms of reinvesting money. So it really is an unconvincing position that Blackburn find themselves in at the moment.
With that being said, how do you fancy them to do next season? Do you think better than this season?
Oh, I mean, better than this season. What, staying up in the 45th game of the season would be a marginal improvement for me. I think Blackburn are going to struggle next season. I don't want to.
Really?
Yeah, I don't want to throw. Oh, they're going to be relegation candidates just yet because a lot can change over the summer with the ownership situation, with all that uncertainty, and obviously recruitment as well. But if I'm looking at this squad now and I'm thinking you've stayed up by 3 points this season, it's going to take a vast amount of improvement in terms of the playing squad to get to improve on that. Could lose Sammy Schmodix, division top goal scorer, if a bid comes in. Are the owners going to say, yep, let's sell him? They've got a lot of uncertainty upstairs. Obviously, Greg Broughton's left, the club secretary's left because of the transfer fiascos with with several transfer windows. I just think the club's not in a very good position at the moment. And what do we always say? Clubs that run poorly, they trend downwards. And I think Blackburn fit that category.
I'm not sure I entirely agree. I don't think we're going to see a vast improvement in Blackburn next season by any means. I would be surprised if um, they were in massive trouble, though. One reason for that is purely the manager, John Eustace. I just think he's just such a safe pair of hands that Blackburn should be all right under him. They have got to be a lot better at the back next season, without a doubt. Only Huddersfield and Rotherham conceded fewer goals than them this season. So they definitely need to improve in that regard. I mean, John Eustace, looking at the data, we did see an improvement when he came in that regard. So that's a good sign. Sammy Szmodics, is he going to be there next season? Don't know. If he does stay, would I have confidence that he's going to have another season like that? I'm not sure, because I'm always a bit sceptical when it's someone who's not really had a season like that before in his career and then does it late in his late 20s, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm not sure I'd be as concerned as you are, but I can kind of understand where you're coming from, because there's a lot going on off the pitch, isn't there? Let's go on to the next club then, Justin, and that is Bristol City. I'm interested to see what you've gone for here as their grade.
I've gone with B-.
Okay, I've gone with a C.
We're about there, aren't we?
I think B- is a bit generous, and I'll tell you why.
Wow.
Because even though they have finished 11th, which is probably slightly better than I think a lot of people would have expected this season, they have had probably the most boring season out of every team in the Championship, because haven't been involved in a relegation battle. May have at one point looked like they may have a slight chance of getting into the playoffs, but apart from that, it's just been bang on mid-table all season.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. I think when you put it like that, yes, it has been a very, very boring, bland, meat and two-veg sort of season. But I think Bristol City have needed that, haven't they? They've needed that blandness to come
They've
from
been
them.
doing that for a few seasons now, Justin.
I don't think they have. I think they've been there or thereabouts in terms of a lower mid-table side, but they've needed to make this step up into a top half team for a long time, and they've done that, albeit 11th place, and albeit being a very bland, boring side. But the reason why I've chosen for a B-, gone for a B- is because there's been a lot of upheaval. Nigel Pearson leaving is a big thing. There's a lot of fan frustration, especially when was it Steve Lansdowne came out and spoke to the press about that appointment, or the appointment of Liam Manning, and going in a slightly different direction. It was a big thing for the football club to go away from a very steady pair of hands, to take a risk with a manager who's never had experience in the Championship with Liam Manning, and to try and make that a success. And I think we saw what this Bristol City side is capable of towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They did improve somewhat under Liam Manning. They kind of went through spits and spats, didn't they? And many Bristol City fans were still quite unsatisfied with the way the club was going in. But that's more because of, the fact that the owners came out and said, look, we want to be pushing for the top six under Liam Manning. And then that obviously didn't transpire this season. But if we're looking ahead to next season with that ambition in mind from the owners, I think there's reason to be optimistic with Bristol City, because I really like Liam Manning as a coach.
Yeah.
I think he plays a progressive style, which I think has, worked really well for him in his short-ish managerial career so far. I think one thing that's really gone under the radar from this past season is how solid Bristol City have been at the back. Only Leicester, Leeds and West Brom have conceded fewer goals than them, which is a good foundation for next season, isn't it? It's the rest of the team that I'm looking at here, and I think there needs to be quite a bit of work done.
But I think the rest of the team is fairly balanced. It's fairly well balanced. You've got to remember they've got Max Bird coming in, who I think is a very, very good, accomplished number 8 in that team. And I think he's come on in terms of his box-to-box ability has really improved under Paul Warne at Derby. So I think there's a lot of potential there in terms of what they can get out of him. But also, I think maybe adding 1 or 2 wing-backs will certainly be helpful if Liam Manning chooses to go with a 3 at the back and wing-backs, of course. But the only thing that's holding him back, from my money, is their striking options. Nahki Wells is good for double figures. He's done a very good job at finding himself in the right place at the right times on a number of occasions. And you've got Tommy Conway there, although there is uncertainty over his future because he's not yet signed a new long-term deal. So they're going to need to replace potentially two of their forwards at the moment and bring in a couple of more. That's going to be a big thing. It depends where those ambitions lie. It depends whether they're going to sell 1 or 2 assets to reinvest that money back into squads. Obviously, Alex Scott left in the summer last season as well. So I think that's the one thing that's holding them back. But I'm like you. I'm very excited about this Bristol City side and what they can do under Liam Manning. It just depends where the ambitions lie in terms of investing that money back into forward options.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I look at that defence and I think that's fine. That's a good foundation to build on for next season. But then the midfield, you mentioned Max Bird's coming in, that's a good start. But there's uncertainty in other areas. And forward line, I think definitely needs improving. Sam Bell, Tommy Conway, two exciting young players, but still quite inconsistent.
Yeah.
Capable of making the step up next season, but that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at there with Bristol City.
Do you think they could be a playoff challenger with the right investment?
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
Well, there you go then. I don't need to add any more on that, really, do we? Let's go to across the River Severn, Justin, to Cardiff. Where have you got their grade?
I've gone with a C+.
Really?
I have, yeah.
I've gone with a B+. Are you surprised about that?
I am actually. I was expecting a D. Yeah, Cardiff fans probably expecting a D as well.
Don't know why you thought that.
I don't know why I thought that. Again, don't know why the Cardiff fans might be thinking that as well. But I've been very impressed with Cardiff, but not impressed enough to give them a higher grading, if you like. Mainly because they concede a lot of goals and don't score many themselves either.
Which is strange for a team who've finished in the top half.
Exactly.
They put it this way, right? And this may infuriate Cardiff fans. For them to finish 12th is really, really good.
Yeah.
Considering our pre-season expectations, for example.
Yeah.
I don't think they've been the 12th best team in the division, though.
I don't know why.
That makes sense because, yes, they finished 12th, but I don't think they've been in even the top 15 best teams in the division. Just in terms of when I've seen them play.
Yeah,
there have been so many times when I've been like, how are this team so high in the table? And it's not anything personal. It's just I think it's Errol Bullett's tactics where, it's not the prettiest at times. It's fair to say that, isn't it? But at the same time, results speak for themselves. He's done really, really well at Cardiff.
I don't think it's necessarily Errol Bullett's tactics because I think Cardiff have had the same issues for the past 3 or 4 years now where they chronically do not create enough chances. They're one of the division's lowest creators. They're one of the division's lowest scorers as well. There's key issues in terms of getting more out of an attacking lineup, and Neil Harris has failed to do it. Mick McCarthy's failed to do it. Steve Morrison and Mark Hudson have both failed to do it. Sabri Lamouchi did a pretty decent job of getting more out of his forward line, but he had Sorry Cabo, who was a revelation when he came in. And Errol Bullett's obviously struggled to do it. So I don't think it's managerial problems. I think it's balance of playing squad, balance of creativity throughout that playing squad. Unless that changes, I don't think Cardiff are going to get. I think 12th place is a very, very good finish for this Cardiff side because I expected them to be a lot lower. And again, balance.
Why do you grade them higher then?
Why are you doing this?
It's your grade, mate. What are we thinking then with Cardiff next season? Because I'm getting a hint of Groundhog Day with Cardiff City, unfortunately, Justin, because as we all know, Errol Bullett, his future is still very much up in the air at the time of recording. We're hearing, murmurings of a new contract, but that's not been nailed down just yet. And as time goes on, it makes you think less and less that he is going to be staying. And that's a concern, isn't it? So that's primarily the big concern. But, the playing squad as well, I don't think is the strongest.
I think they've got strength in places, haven't they? They've got a lot of potential. Centre half options are great. I do like. I know Callum Robinson had his troubles last season, Yaku Mete, but they are good for 8-10 goals a season. They've got a lot of loan players going back to their parent clubs. Obviously, I don't think they're going to sign Carlin Grant permanently. Josh Bowler didn't really light up Wales, did he, with any of his performances, really? There's been probably a couple of spells where he was great. So there's a lot of loan players to replace as well. So Cardiff are in a really interesting position where they're going to have to rebuild. They're going to have to go again. Is Errol Bullock going to want to stay around for that? He's an ambitious manager. He's going to want an ambitious chairman, and Cardiff aren't really in that position to throw things at it.
The question is more, do Cardiff have the same ambitions as Errol Bullock? Because as you say, he clearly wants the club to progress, but the owners don't seem to match that. And that's just what we've become used to with Cardiff, unfortunately, isn't it? It's purely down to the club not being very well run because they've got an owner, for example, who his interest in the club seems to be up and down, doesn't it? And that's the concern where we are now, where Cardiff have a chance to build, but is that going to happen?
Yeah, but I think the main thing is if you've got a chairman who's disinterested, you have to have a very good recruitment team, a very switched on sort of backroom team as well, and not ownership situation, but where the admin side of things come in, and then you need a really good playing squad as well that's suited to a style of play. Over the years, Cardiff have literally, it's been patchwork, hasn't it? It's been patchwork. It's sign players on 1 or 2 year deals, bring him in, do a job, then they go again, and that's really what this, that's what their Premier League legacy is. It's not been sustainable at all, and until Cardiff create those sustainable platforms, they're never going to push higher than a mid-table finish.
And the added concern is, as well, just one final thing on Cardiff, their managerial appointments over the years haven't been great. Broken Clock is right twice a day with Errol Bullitt, for example, but in the lead up to that, there's been more wrong than there have been right. Yeah. And so if Errol Bullitt isn't there next season, that's a big concern, whether they can pull another rabbit out the hat. I don't have much confidence that they can do. Let's go to Coventry City, Justin. I mean, a team we're both feeling quite positive about next season, but what about this season? What grade did you give them?
I've gone with B+.
Really?
Yeah. I've gone with B+.
Wow.
What have you gone with?
I've gone with a D.
Are you serious?
I'm being deadly serious. I'm shocked that you've gone for a B+.
Why have you gone with a D?
For Coventry?
Yes.
We're talking about the same team here, aren't we?
Coventry City in the West Midlands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're saying a team who finished in the playoff final last season were the third biggest spenders in the Championship last summer and finished 9th in the division this season.
Oh dear.
Earn a B+.
Yes. Yeah. I'm right. Context is key with Coventry. Context is absolutely paramount with this Coventry City side. You lose Gus Hamer and Victor Gyökeres, two of the division's best performers last season. Literally, Coventry's so reliant on those two. They needed to replace them, and it's very hard replacing star players. Get that look off your face. They needed to replace 2 star players, and as well as that, one thing you got to consider as well, they released a lot of squad players as well. Michael Rose, Tyler Walker, Sean Maguire, Venkati Darbo all left. Yes, they weren't key performers or key players, but they were squad players. There's a depth issue there with Coventry. And
do you know what I think this is? I think this is Justin Peach finding Coventry just to be a really likeable club.
No.
And finding it difficult to say much wrong about them. Because the highlight of their season is undoubtedly the FA Cup. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a team who finished in the playoffs last season, finished 5th, and have gone backwards after spending a load of money in the summer. And I take your point about them losing 2 outstandingly talented players, their 2 best players, but still they spent the 3rd most in the division last season.
I don't care about spend. No, spending this context doesn't matter because they had to spend.
They had to spend right now.
They absolutely had to spend, and these players, like, be a realist, Ryan. These players are going to come in. They're not going to have an immediate impact. They're coming from different countries.
That's
different
absolutely
clubs.
fine. It's not a B+ season though.
It is B+ season. It's not D season either.
They've gone backwards.
They haven't. Position-wise, they've gone backwards. Yeah.
Exactly. That's backwards.
But sometimes you've got to take a step backwards, take 2 steps forward.
And that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
But they do that next season. But you still got to count this season as one where they have gone backwards. Hence why it's a D.
I don't think they have gone backwards because again, as well, one of the things you've got to consider as well, how competitive it was in the top 6. Leicester, Leeds, and Southampton were always going to take up 3 positions of that top 6.
They finished below 5 teams who spent a lot less than them. Then.
You're basing a lot of your argument on what Coventry has spent.
Exactly.
No, I don't think that's particularly fair.
Why not?
Because, firstly, that money had to be spent, and secondly, it doesn't matter whether you spend 5 million or nothing. If you sign a load of players, they're going to take time to settle. Middlesbrough are under the same aspect to that, and it's a big thing that you need to consider.
Fine, we'll agree to disagree. What were you thinking with them next season then? Justin?
I think they're going to be a challenger. I think they're going to be a challenger.
When you say a challenger, what do you mean?
Promotion.
I think
automatics.
So too. Yeah,
it's an easy one. It's an easy one to.
I wouldn't say it's an easy one. I think if you're someone who's been following the Coventry City story and knows, what this club is like in terms of it's well run. They've got a great squad full of talented players already. Mm-hmm. There's an unbelievable platform there for them to build upon this season. And yes, we were just discussing about them losing the likes of Gyökeres and Hamer and possibly others. This season, they've had to bring in a huge influx of talent And now that they're bedded in, all they need is a handful of new players
Just a little
this
bit,
summer.
little bit of depth,
Not much
isn't it?
more.
It's just a little bit of depth, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's all they really need. And
Exactly.
I think
They've got to keep Ben Sheaf.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
100% hope they do keep Ben Sheaf. I'll be very disappointed and surprised if that's not the case. Obviously, Callum O'Hare's going. We know that. And that is a loss, but it's not completely
It's not a disaster.
irreplaceable.
He's been injured for the best part of 2 seasons, hasn't he? And Coventry has still managed without him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've got the manager in Mark Robbins, who continues to do one of the most underrated jobs, looking at it from a past 10-year perspective of any manager in this country.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot going right for Coventry, and it's going to be difficult because you've got, teams coming down from the Premier League who will have, their big fat wallets with them, and other teams as well.
Coventry have got a big fat wallet, apparently.
Well, they have. But they've also got, Leeds United as well, who we now know will still be in the Championship next season too. But with that being said, I still think Coventry could very well challenge for the top 2 next season.
No, I completely agree. And you've got to consider the fact that Mason Clark's coming in as well. Obviously, signed in January, went back out on loan to Peterborough. Then you've got Victor Torp, who's had 6 months to settle in. And then you had likes of Haji Wright, Ellis Sims. They've all settled in and had really good second halves of the season. There's a lot of momentum there with that Coventry side.
Yeah.
So much momentum. And they're going to. I'd be surprised if Mark Robbins doesn't carry that in to the following season, because one thing they've always struggled, well, especially in the last 2 years, is starting season slow. But they've always had problems. Like season before was the pitch, season after was bedding in players.
And if they didn't start slow this season, who knows where they could have been?
Exactly. They could have been an A minus, let alone a B minus.
Well, leave that there. But yeah, from a Coventry City perspective, it's time to be excited, isn't it?
It really
A
is.
lot needs to be done this summer. Don't get me wrong, but it's an exciting time to be a Coventry City fan, without a doubt. The final team, Justin, before we have a bit of a break, Huddersfield Town. What grade are you giving them?
It's an easy one. It's an F.
I've gone E. I haven't gone as harsh as an F, because I think if they finished bottom, I would give them an F. But, at the start of the season, I wouldn't have been surprised if they went down, and they've gone down.
Yeah, but it's just the way they've gone down. It's just the way they've gone down for me.
I don't think it's outrageous that you've given them an F. I think that's completely fair. We've spoken about them at huge length over the past few weeks, Justin. We don't need to say much more on that. It's just a case, really, of can they bounce back under Michael Duff now?
It's Michael Duff. I put a lot of faith in Michael Duff, not the owner, Kevin Nagel. I think he just blows a lot of hot air, doesn't he? I can't really get behind him, but I can get behind Michael Duff in any circumstance, really, because he had a relatively, I wouldn't say bad ownership situation at Barnsley, but it wasn't settled. Delivered playoffs for them. Swansea wasn't a great spell, but he deserves another chance. And I think Michael Duff's the key variable here for me. I think he can really, really propel this Huddersfield side, but it just depends on their owner, Kevin Nagel.
Yeah, the recruitment since these new owners have come in has been poor, hasn't it?
It really has.
This squad is already not great. It needs a lot of work doing to it, and that recruitment record, which we've just mentioned, doesn't provide much cause for encouragement. But Michael Duff, getting him in is a very good start. That's got to be said. Justin, let's take a quick break. After that, we'll talk about the rest of the teams in part 1 of our grading of each championship team. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. This is our end of season reports, where we're going through each championship team and giving them a grade for the season they've just had and looking ahead to next season as well. Kind of a whistle stop tour, Justin. Obviously, we're trying to fit in 24 teams in the space of 2 episodes,
So it's a lot to get through. A lot to talk about, a lot to think about as well.
I like to think it's high octane, though.
Always is with us, right?
It's like what's the Jason Statham film where he's like full of adrenaline?
Crank.
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of episode we're delivering right here.
We're trying.
Justin, let's go to the next team who we're going through alphabetically, and that is Hull City. What grade are you giving them?
I've gone with C. They delivered exactly what I expected them to deliver, to be honest with you.
I would disagree. I would say B, personally.
Really?
So not much more. I think, you've got to keep in mind what you expected of them at the start of the season. That was more like this is what I fancy them to do, as opposed to I expect them to do that. For example, I expected Leicester City to win the league, as opposed to I fancied Leicester City to win the league. Do you see what I mean?
I understand what you mean, but I think the way you've got to break it down before, when I found Hull probably out of all the 24 teams, the hardest to grade. I found they find them the most tricky, mainly because I think Rossini was delivering what I expected him to deliver, in the sense that they're going to flirt with the playoffs for the majority of the season, maybe get in them, but ultimately they finished 7th, which is, I think, where I predicted them to finish. So they've done what I expected them to do. But the fact that they had the January recruitment and brought in an abundance of talent, which ultimately did ramp up those expectations for them to actually just be a solidified playoff team, they should have been what's the word I'm looking for? They should have been at least more competitive and a bona fide playoff side with the likes of Fabio Carvalho and Asrori coming in. So I think that's why I've dragged them down a little bit, because otherwise it would have been a B. But that January recruitment, unfortunately, probably let Hull down and Rossini down.
I think that's fair. I think that gives more credence to your argument. If you're basing it off the pre-season expectations, I think B is probably fair. If you're looking at what they did in January, when you bring in Fabio Carvalho, for example, et al., then maybe
he's going to be expensive, isn't he? Whether it's a loan, or it's not going to be permanent, but his loans, it's not going to be cheap.
The expectations aren't low after you do that.
Exactly.
Let's be honest.
Exactly.
Let's look at them next season then. Of course, it's been a busy few months, busy few weeks already for Hull after getting rid of Liam Rosenior, and what was a massive shock at the time, wasn't it? But still waiting to find out who the new manager is going to be at the time of recording. So we'll leave that there for now. But it's fair to say that the Hull owner has really almost made a rod for his own back, I suppose, hasn't it? Because he's saying, 7th place, not good enough for us. We want more. And if they don't get that, then Hull supporters will be looking around going, well, why do we get rid of Rosenior then?
Yeah, I mean, there are two ways of looking at it, aren't there? There's a case of, well, if it goes well, then Akin Ilikali, the Hull owner, is vindicated in his decision. But if it goes poorly, I'd have expected Rosenior to deliver a top 6 finish in the coming season. And obviously, if Hull don't do that, don't achieve that, then it's like, well, you shouldn't have sacked Rosenior then. So they're the two potential outcomes, which are very, very obvious. But I think what Ilikali is doing is he's showing ambition. He's showing that. Okay,
it's got to be admired, hasn't it, the ambition?
Exactly. It is admired. Okay, it's frustrating because they've let go a really good, talented, likeable young coach in Liam Rosenior, but you look at Ilikali and go, he wants the best for Hull City. He wants them to compete in the Premier League, and 7th place ultimately isn't good enough. And you hands up, you hold up, and you go, actually no, fair play, Akin, you've done well there. You potentially made a right decision. But as I say, that's what they're going to be measured against now. They're going to have to finish in the top 6 next season. No, finishing 7th isn't going to be good enough, is it?
No, it's not. So they've got to progress again, and if they don't, then it's not going to be a good look for the Hull owners after making such a big call like that. So it's going to be really, really fascinating to see what direction they do go in with the new manager, and then who they bring in as well, because they like to sign some big names, don't they?
They do.
And if that's going to continue, then it's going to be a really fascinating summer in terms of not just the new manager, but also to see who else comes in. Quite a few players have gone out the door already, haven't they? With contracts. So it's quite a bit of churn happening at the KCOM Stadium this summer. Let's go to the next club, Justin. Ipswich Town. What grade have you given them?
I think you're better off leading on this one.
Well, I've given them an A+. Of
course you have.
I'm wondering whether there's a grade above A+ that we can give them. I was thinking maybe the Nobel Peace Prize. I think that'd be more appropriate, because I don't know what's better than an A+ or an A star.
Yeah.
A star and A+ are the same thing, aren't they?
It depends if you're American or if you're English. But you're probably right. But I think world peace is probably the best thing you can award Ipswich Town.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think they conceded too many goals, if we're going to be salty about it. But ultimately, they finished second, haven't they? They finished second. They've outperformed everybody's expectations, literally everybody, because we had the replies of every single fan on Twitter, and we've got the receipts. We know who you are. We don't know where you live.
I'm like the tax man with my receipts.
But losing 6 games after coming up from League One, it's just astounding. And then finishing second in what was an incredibly competitive. I mean, even with Southampton's points total, they should have finished. Well, they'd have finished second in previous years, and a lot of previous years. Similarly, with Leeds and their 90 points, Ipswich have outdone them on a smaller budget. It's just ridiculous.
It's the greatest achievement ever by a manager at Championship level. I still think that points needs repeating at every opportunity. The only issue I've got with it is it's really altered every single grade I've given, because I can't give anyone else an A+ now, because I can't put them on the same pedestal as Ipswich.
Yeah,
so.
You're literally awarding world peace or the Nobel Peace Prize to Ipswich.
Fine, okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is the only time we're ever going to give the Nobel Peace Prize to a team when we do these seasonal gradings.
Do we have that jurisdiction?
I do, yes. Justin, let's go to the next club, and we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on them because we've spoken about them at length on Sunday. That's Leeds United. What grade have you given them?
I might be too generous here, but I've gone with an A. I've gone with an A.
Wow, okay. That's not what I was expected at all. Well, we started off doing this list, and we were on kind of a similar plane, but we've gone completely against each other recently. I've gone with a C.
What? 90 points.
True.
90 points, right?
Maybe we're somewhere in the middle. I think you've gone a bit too generous with it.
I might have, but maybe I'm feeling sorry for them a little bit as well. But I look at Leeds, and again, Daniel Farke identified this when he was talking post-player final. A lot of upheaval, a lot of clauses, ownership, uncertainty, and time it took to get the ownership deal over the line, getting those new players settled, getting them settled into Daniel Farke's style of play, coming down from the Premier League. There's a lot there that Leeds had to contend with, and he still took on 90 points.
Yeah.
90 points. And it's just...
In 99% of the seasons gone by, that gets you promoted, doesn't it? So I can see where you're coming from, but at the same time, the objective at the start of the season was to get promoted, and Leeds haven't done that. So that's why I've come with a C.
Yeah, no, that's fair, but I like to consider the collective here.
Yeah.
They didn't achieve their objective, but they were so close. They were so close. Literally a lick of paint from the Daniel James shot that hit the crossbar.
True.
That's how close they were. Well, that would have been 1-1, so they're a little bit further away than being close, but you get my point. I wouldn't say they deserve to go up, but look, Leeds have had an outstanding season. They've just been very unlucky that the likes of Ipswich have had the season that they had, and Leicester were able to recover from what was a peak crumbling.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Maybe we're somewhere in the middle with the correct grade, but that's how me and you work. We like to even ourselves out, don't we? Justin, let's go to the team who finished ahead of Leeds United. That's Leicester City. Justin is grimacing at me. Oh God, what have you gone for?
I've gone with B+.
I've gone with B. So we're not that far apart.
There we go.
Well, I mean, I think that's fair because, right, start of the season, you expected Leicester to win the league.
Yeah.
I think everyone did. Well, the vast majority of people I saw said Leicester will win the league. And while there's been ups and downs along the way, they did it. And while I think a C would be ridiculous to give that, considering they've won the league with 97 points, an A seems a bit too drastic. So I think a B is a happy kind of medium there.
Yeah, and I think, they accumulated 97 points. It's a great total. They did won a lot of games, but I think the thing that really does leave a mark against that promotion, if you're grading it purely on a grade perspective, is the fact that they did fall away so drastically in February and March. They almost threw it away, and if it wasn't for Leeds picking up injuries, if it wasn't for Southampton as well dropping off, teams would have caught them up. They would have been punished. Leicester got very fortunate that teams around them also started to drop points. So I think that's the big thing here. And I know it's a if but a maybe, but at the end of the day, what Leicester did in the first half of the season was an A+ job, wasn't it? They were incredible up until
100%.
Up until the end of December, and then things started to unravel a little bit, and then it becomes a C- job, doesn't it, in that second half of the season? So you sort of balance it out with Leicester.
I think you've pretty much absolutely nailed it there, Justin. But it's fascinating to see what's going on with the future of Enzo Maresca.
Yeah.
Now, at the time of recording, he's been strongly linked with the Chelsea job. And if reports are to be believed, he really wants the Chelsea job as well, which is interesting, isn't it? Well, when you saw those links, were you surprised?
Yes, because I think there are better coaches out there than Enzo Maresca. I know he's just won the championship title, but Kieran McKenna's a much better manager, I think, a much better rounded manager, I think. And obviously there are others like Roberto De Zerbi as well. We don't need to talk about Premier League standard managers, but I think there are better suited tacticians than Enzo Maresca. That being said, I think he fits the mould of Chelsea. They want a younger manager. They want a manager with a consistent style of play and who's good at bringing through youngsters, and Enzo Maresca's done all of that at Leicester this season. He's done a really good job of it. But I think there are obvious flaws in Enzo Maresca's game. But then again, I'd be surprised as well that if he sticks around at Leicester, because there's a lot of uncertainty there. And Chelsea's a nice job because by next year, he'll have a nice compensation package as well.
Yes, that does seem to be a common thing with Chelsea at the moment, doesn't it? The thing I would say about Enzo Maresca, right, is yes, Leicester did have that fall off in the final third of the season, and I completely get that, and that's why there's going to be some understandable scepticism about him. But For 2/3 of the season, Leicester were absolutely cruising the league, and they were doing it so professionally as well. They controlled games so damn well, and that's why it looked like Leicester had the league pretty much in the bag by around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And we've got to keep that in mind, and that's why I think his managerial experience so far, even though it is quite limited, can carry over to a club like Chelsea. And the other thing is, right, think about it this way, and this is quite an ambiguous way of thinking about it, but I think it is a valid one. Mikel Arteta, his job at Arsenal is the first job that he's had in management, right?
Yeah.
And he's obviously from the school of Guardiola, having worked closely with him. Maresca, if he was given the same kind of job, he'd be learning on the job as well. But if Arteta came down to a championship club, I think he'd be having, kind of similar season to what Maresca was doing. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think the variable you've got to consider in Maresca is how stubborn he is tactically. I think Mikel Arteta's got a little bit more flexibility about him.
That's only come on recently.
True.
Because his start at Arsenal was shocking, wasn't it? So
It was, but again, the other thing that worries me about Maresca is, again, he went up against the fans as well. I think that's a big thing. He was obviously earlier on in the season, Leicester fans were frustrated at how boring things were under him, style of play wise. I know they were getting results, but they weren't entertained. And he went up against the fans, and I think, especially when you're in a position, maybe a little bit more empathy from his perspective would have gone a long way, rather than just saying, no, we're playing this way. They don't like it.
They weren't moaning about being top of the league.
Yeah, but moaning's moaning, Ryan. If they're not entertained, football's a show. This is a show.
For the fans, it is, but I don't think the owners are saying that. They're saying about getting back to the Premier League.
It's true, but it's more so how he dealt with it. But I think Maresca's, what he's shown is a tactical stubbornness that when they were losing, when things got tough, he stuck to. And yes, it came out for him in the end, but he really should have tried to change things up. He relies heavily on individual players as well, which is a big thing for me.
I think he deserves more respect when it comes to the Chelsea job, is the thing I would say. Because, yes, I understand that Leicester did fall off under him towards the end of the season, but I've seen a lot of people acting like it's an absolute travesty.
He reminds me a lot of Frank Lampard. He really does.
That is an outrageous thing to say.
Really isn't. It's not. He's tactically naive and stubborn at times, relies heavily on individuals, and of course is stepping up from the Championship into the Premier League. There's no bridge there for him. He's going straight from one extreme to another.
That is absolutely outrageous. That's not a comparison to be made at all. And this is exactly what I mean when I say he deserves more respect than certain, outsiders have given him. I mean, keep in mind the whole picture. His job was to get Leicester promoted, and they did that fairly comfortably in the end.
Yeah.
Admittedly, very talented squad, but, for 2/3 of the season, they were absolutely flying away with the league. And that's what I'm trying to get to the point about. Let's go to the next club, Justin. It's Middlesbrough. What grade have you given with them? I feel like we may be quite far apart on this.
I found, again, they're a side I found very difficult, but I've gone with C.
Oh, I've gone with C as well.
There we go.
Never mind. Let's move on. I mean, the thing is with Middlesbrough, I don't think it's been a bad season. I don't think it's been a good season. Hence why I see is a pretty good thing. I mean, so many people would have expected them to build upon last season, where they got to the playoff semi-finals, but looking like they could even get automatically promoted at one stage, and they haven't. But ultimately, they finished 8th, which is strange because I feel like they finished lower.
It does feel like they finished lower, but I think they found themselves in a similar position to Coventry, where they spent a fair bit of money. They lost a few key performers, lost loan players, needed to replace them. There's a lot of upheaval and a lot of adjusting to that, which is why I think it was perhaps a little bit harsh to mark Coventry as low as you did. And with this Middlesbrough side being so similar, it's a slight contradiction there. But for me, I think what Carrick has had to deal with this season, again, a lot of people forget the ridiculous injury crisis he had defensively.
Yeah.
I think he had a more settled back four, more settled back line.
Not just in the defence, actually, Justin, all over the squad.
Well, yeah, all over the squad, but particularly in defence, it was horrendous. They had one fit centre-half at one point.
Yeah.
So I think if they have a more settled back line, they have a lot more consistency and maybe have a bit more of a skirmish at the top 6. Don't think they would have ended up finishing in it this season, but it would have been a lot more convincing, because it wasn't. It was very inconsistent. And that's why it feels like Middlesbrough finished lower than 8th this season. But they finished 8th. I think it's a good season because, like I say, a lot of transition, a lot of upheaval.
I wouldn't say good. I'd say okay.
I think it's good when again, context is everything. A lot of movement with transfers, injury crisis. Yeah, they're too big. They're two big factors.
That's fair. That is absolutely fair. You look at the injuries that they have had, but I think also the recruitment hasn't been sublime this season. I mean, they considering the talent who went out the door for, a fair bit of money.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Chuba Akpom, I mean, Cameron Archer and Ramsey, for example, they were only on loan, weren't they? Chuba Akpom, they actually got some money for. But, they've lost a lot of talent. They didn't do a great job of replacing it, I don't think.
I disagree. And the reason why I disagree is because those players have come good. Latilaf looked really, really outstanding towards the end of the season.
Would you rather Cameron Archer or Latilaf?
Well, right now,
exactly.
I don't know. Right now, I'd probably go with Latilaf because he's in form. He's in form. He's in form, isn't he?
You have come here today with your big bag of hot takes, haven't you? And you were just throwing them at me. It's absolutely
I've been in London for too long, that's why.
Just turned cynical.
Just turned cynical, yeah. No,
just offended such a large section of our fan base.
It's all right. There's only 2 London clubs in next season, so we're all right.
Still.
But no, I think it's just the time it takes those signings to bed in. So I think that's why it's a little bit blurred in the sense that I think the recruitment was fine. It was good enough. It just took those players time to bed in. They weren't having an immediate impact, and I think that's what probably muddies the water a little bit for you.
Looking ahead to next season, Justin, I am quite quietly optimistic about Middlesbrough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have got to keep in mind that this is Middlesbrough. It's a big club who have been, knocking on the door of promotion for a few seasons now, without actually much success in opening that door. But having said that, I think there are some pretty good foundations here for them to have a good crack at doing something quite good next season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of it will depend on who's actually sticking around next season, whether they can get players back from this past season, and what they add in the summer. But first and foremost, I really like Michael Carrick as a manager. I think he plays lovely football, and I think that's a really important part, first and foremost. And we've seen what he did, the season before, the one that's just gone, that he is a really, really good manager. And when you look at the squad that they've got now, the likes of, Finn Azaz is a player I really like, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he develops in this Middlesbrough team. Latte is someone who's really finally come good for Middlesbrough. Dan Barlas, I think, is another player who's starting to, grow into this Middlesbrough team as well. And then the defence as well, that there's a lot of talented players there who we know are just very good, solid operators at Championship level. So I think there's a lot to like about this Middlesbrough team heading into next season.
Yeah, there is. The formula's there, isn't it? And again, those players that they signed last summer that took time to get settled, have settled, and have looked brilliant. Lucas Engels is another one. Rev Vandenberg has been fantastic in defence. He's had to really step up because of that injury crisis. Darragh Lenihan, hopefully he comes back fit. Matt Clark finds that form and fitness that we know he can.
He's been very good this season.
Yeah, he has. But again, he's almost had to come out of the blue because he spent such a long time out injured.
Yeah.
So again, if he can find that form and fitness he had, that really put him on the on everyone's radar. Middlesbrough have got such a good, well-balanced side, and that's
a spine, isn't it?
It really is.
A lot of managers like a good, solid spine, and Middlesbrough seem to have that.
Yeah.
And if they can build around that, Hayden Hackney is another player we haven't even mentioned.
Exactly.
Obviously, not had maybe the season that people are expected this season.
But he's been injured as well.
But he has been injured. So, with that being said, that's a very good spine to build around. And then if you add in,
you've got me excited about this Borough team now.
Well, there you go then.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I've convinced you.
Ooh.
So, with that being said, if they add in the right areas this summer, give Michael Carrick a bit of backing, then Middlesbrough could be a team to keep an eye on next season. A lot of people expected them to do that this past season, but next season could be a special season for Middlesbrough. Say it quietly, but it could be the case. The final team we'll touch on in this episode, Justin, is Millwall. I think this was the team I was struggling to grade the most for me, Justin, personally. I know you said Hull earlier, but Millwall, I really struggled. What have you gone for out of interest?
There's almost probably going to be a little bit of contradiction with Millwall, because I've gone with D.
Oh, I've gone with D as well.
Oh, is he enough? But finishing 13th, that's why the contradiction comes in.
I was looking at the league table. I was like, Millwall finished 13th.
It's ridiculous, really, when you factor that in. But
how?
Yeah, how did Millwall finish 13th? How poor was that second half, a lower mid-table in the second half of the season? Millwall were destined for relegation up until sort of 7 or 8 games to go. They were really down, fighting in the trenches. I mean, that's exactly where Millwall need to be to thrive, I think. But for me, I think the reason why I've given them a D is playoff aspirations to relegation, fighters for long periods of the season. I know they finished mid-table in the end, but to be in a position where you're punching to get into the Premier League to then be punching to stay out of League One is quite a drop-off. And 3 managers this season again isn't a good measurable.
No, it's not. I mean, this season has been massively salvaged by the job that Neil Harris has done in since he's come in. I mean, I'm just looking at it now. Only Middlesbrough and Ipswich picked up more points than Millwall since Neil Harris came in, which is pretty outstanding. And usually when I look at a team who's finished the season well, I usually think, oh, that's quite exciting, and that means they've got something to build on for next season. However, I'm completely contradicting myself here and thinking I don't have that feeling with Millwall, despite them finishing the season so well. And it's something which really, rubs Millwall fans up the wrong way, but it's because of Neil Harris.
Neil Harris is a very unconvincing character, especially at Championship level, which is probably a little bit harsh. But at the same time, like he dropped down to League Two to get a job at Gillingham. He then had to come up to Cambridge in League One. It's an interesting career path, but sometimes managers just tends to gel. And obviously Neil Harris is Millwall, isn't he? He's Millwall through and through. And sometimes it just works. But how sustainable is that? Because it fizzled out for him at one point. It's probably going to do the same again. And I think the reason why that I'm less optimistic about Millwall under Neil Harris is because Millwall were going in a direction that was a positive one. They really were progressing. They had a really good summer. Well, not a really good summer. They had a summer where they backed Gary Rowett in terms of signings. Didn't really pay out. And then they went for a young progressive appointment in Joe Edwards. And again, it didn't pay out. In fact, Chairman James Berylson said himself, when speaking about Joe Edwards, he said he's somebody who I think is very innovative and has some positive ideas about the progression as we can make as a club. I don't think Neil Harris is very innovative.
I think that's understating it.
Yeah, I don't think he's an innovative manager, and I don't think they're going to progress under him. So it's almost, Chairman's pretty much contradicted himself by appointing Neil Harris.
If you're looking for a progressive appointment, I think Neil Harris is the exact opposite of that. Yeah. And while he does deserve respect for the job that he's done previously at Championship level with other clubs. But having said that, when you've got him playing the kind of football that he does, it doesn't provide me with much encouragement for the future of Millwall. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe we'll see Millwall go into next season carrying on that superb form and then completely shocking us. Kind of like a good comparison, I suppose, would be Stevenage and Steve Evans this season down in League One. Maybe we'll see that kind of thing happen where they just play a completely different style to what everyone else does, and it really profits for them. And if they manage to keep the likes of Zian Fleming, for example, Casper Denora as well, maybe they manage to get Brooke Knowlton-Cuffy back next season as well, then this would all be really positive things for Millwall heading into next season. Having said that, that's just... I just don't have that encouragement with me because I just think Millwall seem to be making some strange decisions at the moment that don't give me much encouragement for the future. And I also think that the form that we have seen that has kind of salvaged this, it's almost stat padding this season for Millwall. It feels like...
It's a lot of recency bias, isn't it?
There's only so far you can get with a manager who's a club legend saying... You've got to play better. And while it's gone on for a lot longer than I expected, over the course of a 46-game season, I don't think Neil Harris has the tactical capability of making Millwall play outstandingly better than this squad actually is, unfortunately. Justin, there we go. Part 1 of our end-of-season grading has come to an end. That means we've got part 2, which... is already out, ladies and gentlemen. Go and listen to that right now. It's in your podcast feeds right now. So part 2 with the second half of the teams alphabetically in the Championship. Go and listen to it right now for all our gradings there, Justin. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast, and I have been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.